By 1752, the British Parliament had passed an act making the theft of Borrowdale graphite a strict criminal offense. The punishment was hard labor, or worse, transportation. You could be sentenced to a penal colony on the other side of the world for stealing pencil lead. The most powerful government on Earth was fighting a sprawling, desperate war against smugglers, middlemen, and everyday people who simply wanted a reliable way to write things down. Parliament recognized that a monopoly on Borrowdale graphite meant a monopoly on precision. By locking down the raw material, they controlled the most advanced tool for military and industrial correspondence available in the 18th century. To understand why graphite was so heavily guarded, we have to go back to 1564, in the isolated fells of Cumbria, England. After a storm ripped a tree from the hillside, a local shepherd found a heavy, black, crystalline substance in the mud beneath the roots. It didn't burn, but it left a dark, clean mark on his hands. Before this discovery, writing was a frustrating process. Scribes used thin rods of lead or alloys that barely left a silvery scratch. Artists used a technique called silver point, dragging a fine wire across chemically prepared paper. It was delicate work, but the line was faint, and worse, it was entirely permanent. The substance in the mud was pure graphite, and it solved every one of those problems. It could be sharpened to a fine point, it produced a bold, dark line, and crucially, with a little effort, you could actually erase it. Queen Elizabeth's advisors saw the military and economic stakes immediately. The Crown seized the Borrowdale mine and strictly restricted access. They only allowed the mine to operate for a few weeks each year, deliberately choking the supply to keep prices artificially high. By hoarding this strange black mineral, the British Crown created a massive scarcity. They locked down the world's only known source of pure graphite, and in doing so, they triggered a global imbalance that would last for centuries. Artificial scarcity predictably backfired. Because the Crown choked the supply, Borrowdale graphite quickly became worth more per ounce than most metals. This triggered a sprawling black market. Mine workers took bribes, and traders packed graphite into lead-lined boxes to disguise its weight from customs inspectors. Middlemen smuggled the material across the North Sea, funneling it to supply-starved craftsmen in European manufacturing hubs, particularly the city of Nuremberg. In Germany, craftsmen stretched this highly expensive, impure smuggled graphite to make it profitable. A rogue manufacturer named Friedrich Stedler broke strict guild laws. He figured out how to mix the lower-grade graphite with sulfur and resin, and then enclosed that mixture inside a hollowed-out stick of cedar. He controlled the process from raw material to finished product in a single operation. The world's first true pencil manufacturing economy wasn't the result of free trade. It was built entirely on illegal workarounds to bypass a British state monopoly. This map highlights how economic friction escalated into a military crisis. Napoleon was at war with Britain. Knowing France relied on British graphite, the Crown enforced a total embargo. Without writing tools, the military was paralyzed. Maps couldn't be drafted, and commanders struggled to communicate. Under immense pressure, the French army ordered Nicolas Jacques Conté, a brilliant military scientist who had already lost his left eye in a hydrogen explosion, to invent a synthetic alternative from scratch. The embargo effectively blindsided the French command. Without a way to mass-produce precision writing tools, Napoleon's army was losing its ability to draft and distribute the complex coordinates required for 18th century warfare. Conté was given an incredibly tight window. He had exactly 6 days to engineer a working writing tool using only the low-grade, highly impure graphite available in France. He abandoned the old methods of cutting raw chunks. Instead, he ground the inferior graphite down into a fine powder. He then mixed that dark powder with wet clay, formed the paste into rods, and fired them at high temperatures in a kiln. This chemical process yielded a secondary result that standardized writing. As we can see in this model, adjusting the exact ratio of the mixture allowed him to control the performance of the tool. Adding more clay creates a harder stick that draws a thinner line. Adding more graphite results in a softer stick and a darker mark. In under a week, Conté solved the wartime crisis. He permanently broke the British monopoly on natural graphite, and he invented the exact H&B grading system, standing for hardness and blackness, that we still use to categorize pencils today. Across the Atlantic, American manufacturers would later perfect the physical form of the object. Before moving to Walden Pond, Henry David Thoreau researched and experimented in his family's factory, independently adapting Conté's clay graphite formula to work with New England's impure graphite. Decades later, industrialists like Joseph Dixon introduced massive mechanical finishing processes. In 1858, a stationer named Hyman Lipman patented the idea of attaching a small rubber eraser directly to the end of the wood. And by the early 20th century, the Dixon Company painted their mass-produced model of bright, distinct yellow, creating the iconic Ticonderoga No. 2. Every No. 2 pencil carries the DNA of Conté's wartime desperation and the 200-year struggle over raw materials, engineering, and state secrets that followed.